Hey, what's
Hey
going
man,
on?
how are
Yeah,
you?
good, thank you. How are you?
Hey, doing good, brother. What's been happening?
Not much, not much. Just enjoying the hot weather over here, I guess. So,
Yeah,
yeah, how are things over there?
yeah. I mean, it's a bit weird at the minute. A lot of kind of clusters growing around New South Wales. So we were
Sure, yeah.
lucky enough to get a camp going
Cool.
in the school holidays because we just don't know what's going to happen over the next few weeks and beyond. But yeah, strange times indeed, my friend. Have you been dealing with it okay? Everything been
Yeah,
okay over there?
yeah, everything's been good. Haven't been doing too much. But, all the work we kind of do is easily online with everything that's going on right now. So, everything's been going on
Yep.
for sure.
So I did a bit of an introduction to one and all. Gonna have a few people jumping on board or otherwise, but this is going to go on our Instagram TV account after this. So if you are watching, our U90 Nation, if you're watching, then you can certainly jump back on board to the feed and view some of the content that we're going to cook up with Coach. But man, I'm really excited to have you on board and just get more of an insight for especially our kids in and around Australia, um, who probably don't understand what your background is, where you hail from, and obviously we'll probably go through a little bit of a history, um, your playing background, where you grew up, and how you ended up in the US. So maybe that's what we're going to do. Maybe kick off with that. Maybe go back into time and get a little bit more
Yeah.
clarity about a young Felix Vu and where you grew up and what got you into the beautiful game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hopefully I'm still young, so hopefully there's still a long journey left. But no, I mean, kind of obviously I was born and raised in Melbourne. My parents were Vietnamese, so they actually came over to Australia during the American War.
Wow.
So that's kind of how that was brought about. Just kind of was born and raised in just a suburb called Springvale, where I guess that would be kind of like I forgot what it's called in Sydney, but just kind of where all the Asians kind of are. I forgot what
Like,
it's called in
I
Sydney,
think,
but
I think it's like a Cabramatta of Sydney.
Canberra Matter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been there. I've been there. No. So
You knew
yeah,
it.
that's kind of where I was. What was that? Sorry.
You knew it straight away when I said it, Cabramatta.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Good food there. Good food there.
yeah,
No, so that's where I was kind of born and kind of raised there, and then from there kind of moved to Noble Park. That's where I kind of the Noble Park Dandenong area was a big immigrant area, so I was able to play lots of football, and that's kind of where I started my journey or my love for the game. Just kind of knowing many different people, kind of similar to me, with their parents kind of being first generation and coming from many different countries. The first club that I played for was a Macedonian club, so it had a
wow.
massive yeah, yeah. So it had a massive influence on me, just how I viewed the game, and just the kind of culture, I guess, of like an Eastern European football culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So it was great for me to learn from that kind of area, to start playing football at that, you know around that culture.
yeah,
um it made me understand that obviously football is, I think every young player aspires to become a professional soccer player or whatever it is. But I think just the culture of having a big community, a big family, and everyone kind of there because they love the game. That was kind of my roots, and that was massive for me, and something that I try and continue to carry on to this day.
yeah.
From there, when I was about 14, 15, and then I moved from there to play for Oakley Cannons, which is a Greek club, and it's an NPL team, I guess.
You
So I
you
played kind of.
you went to the other side of the culture, mate. You went from Macedonia to Greek.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, it was great. I mean, no, it was great. Went from there to Greek, and learned some. Greek words along the way as well. But no, I played for Oakley Cannons up until I was about 18, 19. At that time, I was just training. I was playing with the U18 teams, but I'd train occasionally with the senior side and the under 21s side. So obviously for me that was massive, and it made me realize how high the level is. Just kind of being an 18-year-old, training with seniors, and that kind of, I guess, motivated me to go play at the highest level that I could play at. And then kind of from there, I was 18, 19 at the time. I got an opportunity to go play at Alderson Brothers University. I was in touch with the coach at the time, Dan Kelly and Rob Stewart. So yeah, it was never, college soccer was something that, I knew of, and people had spoken to me about it. But I was never, I guess, truly serious about it until, when I was 18. And, I thought an opportunity to go overseas, play, have an experience to play soccer in a different country, experience another culture. And I, just kind of jumped at it, so that's kind of how I wound up at AB.
So if we go back in time, and I've travelled throughout South Asia and different parts of Asia and whatnot, and I have experienced football in those countries as well, meaning that, I've actually sat in stadiums where there are tens of thousands of people watching football, right? So we've had some fantastic recruits over the years, very, very talented Vietnamese background players, like Tony Lowe, who's the brother of Marty Lowe, and gone on and played in the collegiate market themselves. I know that Vietnam have a very strong affinity for football. Where does that stem for in the country? How did it grow in Vietnam? And growing up, was that a big part of your family's kind of day to day? Did Dad kind of follow any football at all, or where does that?
No. Yeah, I mean, Vietnam is obviously a third world country, so for them, the passion for football kind of comes from an experience of enjoying, food and drink with people, and then football is obviously the side, and that's kind of, I guess, how was introduced. My dad was introduced kind of to the soccer, but he was never massive on it. Actually, my family they're all like musicians, so they were really good at music. But how it all kind of started with me wanting to play soccer was my dad. He bought a 30 case of Victoria Bitter, and it came with a soccer ball with all these flags on it. And then he was like, "Here, go kick this against the wall." And I did, and I realized this was great, and I didn't stop playing ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it all started with the case of VB.
Yeah, that's how all great stories start, doesn't it?
Yeah, mate. Look, if none of you understand, if you're from different countries jumping on board, Victoria Bitter is a beer down here in America. Everyone talks about Foster's. Foster's is terrible. Victoria Bitter's the stuff. VB is the stuff you need to drink. So that's good that Dad picked up a case of VB, and then a football was attached to that. I'm trying to figure out where they had a promotion where it was like, soccer and VB. Was it a World Cup or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was the 2002 World Cup, actually. The 2002 World Cup.
Yes.
I think it was it was about 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. Yeah.
That is just absolutely crazy, man. So I started. Okay, so obviously, that's where it all kind of kicked off. The clubs that you played for in Victoria, did you have any mentors that really kind of, obviously the European clubs, just like myself and many, many others here locally, growing up, having a lot of different kind of European coaches bringing us up, building up our own platform to be able to play at a higher level. So was there anyone in those early phases of development that really influenced you? Because you're a goalkeeper, right? So I know everyone in the goalkeeping world for the most part. Um,
Yeah.
so was there anyone like, Roy Hunter or someone down in Melbourne or someone that kind of, worked with you growing up that was, a goalkeeper coach that helped you find the passion for that position?
No, it was obviously, you know, my family coming, being in a working class family, we weren't able to afford, I guess, the nicest clubs at the time, and obviously goalkeeper coaching is a speciality, if you can afford it. So I never had much access to goalkeeper coaches. For me, it was the wall and YouTube. Luckily, it was a good time, in the internet with the internet. But in terms of big influences, especially in Australia, his name was Juan Sastre. He was actually my coach while I was at Oakley Cannons.
Yep.
He played. So growing up, he played in the VIS. I think
Yep.
I think that's like a while ago now. And he was in the AIS and all that. And he actually was training with Atletico Madrid at the
Well,
time, and he was going to get a contract, and he unfortunately blew out his knee. So he was probably the biggest influence just on my development as a player. You could say a player, but mainly as a person in football, if that makes sense. It wasn't just about the playing; it was about what journey football could take you through. And for me, he was a big influence on me. He was great to me, and what a lot of the foundations that I have today that kind of brought me over here was kind of developed from him. So I would say I wouldn't say I had many mentors, but if I had to pick one, it would definitely be him. He was actually a striker, and so yeah, I mean, I didn't have much goalkeeper influences kind of growing up. I just know that there was a certain stage where they told me to go play in goal, and I remember at the time, it was yeah, I hadn't started playing soccer yet. But so the school team, we had like two school teams, like an A and a B team, and I was goalkeeping because I was decent at it, and they said I should try it for the school team, and then they put me on the A team, and I was the only person on the A team who didn't play for a club. So that's kind of,
wow.
and they were like, oh, yeah, you should go play for a club, this and that, and then I was like, you know what, why not? And then that's kind of how that started.
Wow.
So yeah,
Interesting journey that it
yeah,
wasn't necessarily as a goalkeeper, you know, my whole life as a goalkeeper and it started at a very young age. I always had a goalkeeping mentor by chance as well, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
all those little, moments in time where I met people who actually came from very, very, very elite football environments helped shape me as a very, as a young goalkeeper to be able to play at an elite level or at a youth level at least. But that's really, really interesting that you say that. In fact, that your most influential coach was a striker, and it's a telling thing from a positional perspective because if we look at the role of the goalkeeper today in the modern game, being great with your feet it is just as important as being great with your hands, right? So even more so now with your
yeah,
feet. Right? So having that kind of emphasis on your game probably enhanced your game a lot more in a modern sense, right? So you were able to potentially shift to a higher level of play that, potentially, my generation of goalkeepers or otherwise coming up, weren't necessarily, just focusing on their feet. The game was played in a very different light. So it's interesting that you say that. So tell me more about this transition. So you were in high school. How'd you hear about? Obviously, you went through a third-party agency back then. How'd you kind of hear about the collegiate pathway, and how did what really stood out for you in regard to the potential of that pathway?
yeah. So There was a Scottish coach that I was playing under. I'd done a pre-season with I'm not sure if you know them, Dandenong City. They're a Croatian club. So I was doing pre-season with them, and the senior coach at the time, who was Harry Bingham, he's a Scottish coach. He's quite popular down in Melbourne, and he invited me to come to a trial. Because he had me on a team that was, it was one of those like representative teams that we're going to go to Asia. So, it was kind of considered like, you were representing Australia, but it was just like a Melbourne based kind of team. I don't know exactly what it's called, but he wanted me to play on that team, which was great. And then he wanted me to show up to a trial, which I guess was, he was working for NSR at the time.
Yep.
And I didn't know that. And then, so I just showed up to the trial, and then he was kind of chatting to me about everything. And then he kind of spoke to me about the opportunity to go to the US through the NSR. And I mean, that's kind of how all that came about, but, for me, I was looking at different options, and actually the third party agency that I went through it's an American based company. It's called NCAA. So that was the company that I went through. But no, like that's kind of how all that started. It was just from the coach talking to me about this opportunity. Looking back in hindsight, it was probably, trying to, get me to sign with the agency for whatever reason. But no, that's kind of how that all came apart.
Yeah, and you didn't really think about it as a potential pathway. Like I know when I was recruited many years prior to even yourself, and there were no companies floating about back then. There were online databases and things like that, and that was interesting. That even back then it wasn't even a thought, because everything that I thought about as a player was like, hey, I want to play at an elite level in Europe, because I already experienced it at a young age, and I thought that's where I wanted to be. That's where everyone who quote unquote makes it needs to be. And you didn't really ever think about the collegiate market. And so it's interesting that it kind of fell in your lap in that regard, and that you had someone there that was kind of talking about it, and it just seemed like an interesting route, right? A lot of kids, even I talk to prospects every single day, and their families, they don't even realise just how immense the system is over in the US, and just how broad it is, and how many opportunities you have, and how many entry points in the system you actually have. And I mean, you've been living and breathing that. We'll get to your coaching kind of background in a moment, but talk to us about that transition. So you're this young guy from Melbourne, you hear about this opportunity, you tell mum and dad, hey, I've got this opportunity. How do they react to it, one? And two, how was that transition over? How was that first kind of step onto American soil once you kind of signed the deal?
Yeah, so when I spoke about it to my parents, they weren't too impressed with it. They weren't too happy with it. Obviously, just kind of being from like an Asian kind of culture, they wanted me to kind of stick around the family and everything like that. But I think what made them a little bit more open to the opportunity was I have family in Texas over here, and they were kind of telling my mum, who was she had the biggest concerns, obviously being a mother. They were like, give him a chance, see what it's like. It's a good experience, and if everything falls into place in terms of how it's going to work, then take it. So they weren't happy with that, but eventually they grew onto it. And I mean, they can't say too much. I've been here about 7 years now. So, but no, I mean, coming from Australia, where I played with different teams, like I was saying before, with different teams from different cultures, and then coming over to America, it was a big change in a sense. It was, but it was not something that I wasn't ready for, if that makes sense. There was lots of different internationals. I remember, rocking up my first day at AB. There was a my roommate was from England, but his parents were like Jamaican. There was a Scottish guy across the suite from me, and for me that was just like, it was mind blowing. But it was also, I was like, you know what, this is what I committed to, and this is what I wanted to do, and this is the experience that I feel like I had been working towards. You know what I mean? And for me, it was, I definitely came into my own, if that makes sense. When I came into America and I started training and getting into the swing of things, for me it was, it was very, it was easy to adapt to the American game. I think just because I've had so many different coaches in Australia. So for me, it was a little bit easier than I think than most people. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's,
That was the transition.
just thinking about it now. Sorry, what was that?
That was the transition. It was just, in a new environment, and you can either kind of fold pretty quickly or you can embrace it, right? And I think that for you, and like many of the kids that experience it, it's almost like stars in your eyes, right? Because you're like, this is crazy. I'm meeting all these people from all around the world. And, just amazing to be in a situation where you're able to embrace all these different cultures, but more importantly, as a footballer, all these different football cultures as well, right? So,
exactly, yeah.
So it's really interesting that you see that transition. Actually, it's almost like a carbon copy of Tony Lowe, who played at Cal State San Bernardino, right? So Tony was like very, very similar. Mum and Dad were like, strict kind of Vietnamese, and they were like, no, what's all this business, he got a good deal when we sent him over, and then outside of that, like, it was that first, handful of months of transition, adaptation, and then really coming into your own. And I saw that evolution of Tony to a point where, he's back on the ground in Australia now after graduating and otherwise spending time over there, as I think he was an assistant coach at one of the NCAA Division 2 program or some such. And, just seeing that evolution of a player, in the collegiate system, like you come from a different environment, different culture otherwise, but then you're immersed in a number of, different cultures, together with, kids from all around the world, all trying to aspire to, to the same thing that you're trying to aspire to. And it becomes almost like this one big happy family over the time that you're there. So talk to me about that. Like, what was your kind of the first day like when you rocked up? You mentioned that you met all these different, cultures, but what was the training like? What was the level of play like? Did you have to adapt really quickly to it? Did you find that you were easing into it pretty quickly because you obviously came from elite training environment yourself back home in Melbourne?
Yeah, I mean, the first day, taking me back now, some of these questions. So I'm trying to think them through.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's not that long ago, but it feels like so long ago, if that makes sense. But no, the first day, it was definitely a little bit different than most people. I think, when I first came in, I didn't have my medical form, so I couldn't train with the team because, I just didn't read that part. There were a few other guys who didn't do that either. So my first day was, we just ran with the guys, just done like some campus laps. And then, they would do some training like on their own, the team, and they would play just some 7v7 on the training pitches. And that was really interesting because, they had 4 goalkeepers at the time. And so I was the 5th goalkeeper. And all of them, obviously had their gloves on ready to go. And I got to the training pitch a little bit later. So they had their 4 goals, their 2 fields go on, and they actually had an odd number of outfield players. So I end up playing up front, for for the small-sided scrimmages and stuff like that. Banged in a few goals, no big deal. But that was kind of my introduction to Alderson and Brodus University. And I remember the head coach, saying, "Oh, why don't you go play in goal? So so we can get a look at you or whatever." But he was obviously that wasn't, I guess, he wasn't running the session or anything like that. He was just kind of seeing it from the side. But at the time, I was just like, "Yeah, no, I will eventually." But at the time, I was just playing up front and just enjoying what I could do. But no, that was kind of the first day or two where we kind of just got together with the team and we're just kind of scrimmaging, mucking around on the pitch. The first actual day of training, when I was able to be able to train with the team, no, it was really good. For me, I felt good, I felt sharp, and so for me there wasn't much of an adaptation period. So I was very lucky in that sense. I was working with different coaches back home, and I was just trying to get myself as fit and as sharp as possible. And for me, there was no I guess pressure to perform in my mind. For me, it was just about I guess for the thing that I learned from my mentor Juan, that we were talking about. He was a striker, obviously. The thing that I learned a lot was you can go through all these different goalkeeper coaches and whatever, and they'll tell you, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. But the advice that always stuck with me was that he always said, just don't let the ball in the goal. And that was, for me, that was the best advice. Don't think about anything else, just don't let it in. So no, I had a really good. I'd done really well during the year, and unfortunately, I was actually redshirted my first year. But no, I felt really good in training. I felt really sharp, and even though I didn't play a game, obviously being ineligible and everything like that, I still felt like I was improving. I was still getting better, obviously, with America and colleges, the way it's set up. The facilities are first class. The access you have to obviously athletic trainers, to all this stuff. The level of professionalism. Just being in that environment is helped me a lot in many ways. So, even though I wasn't technically able to play a game that first year, I still grew a lot and I still developed a lot as a player. But no, going back to your question, sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but
right.
No, I just think my, just the combination of having those stars in my eyes, I guess, and that mentality of, all right, just don't let the ball in the net. For me, it was relaxing, and it made me just go, all right, I'm here, and I end up having a really good first year as far as we could go without playing the game, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's massive that you say that, because a lot of kids kind of shy away if, for any reason, they come through the process, say with Upper 90, and if they've come in late in the process or otherwise, or they weren't academically on par, the concept of even thinking about, well, I've actually got to sit out a year, becomes this really daunting kind of feeling where they're thinking, well, hey, I'm not, I don't want to be in an environment where I want to play. But what you took on board was really powerful, meaning that you saw that there was a longer play in terms of the whole process for you. It's a 4-year process. And that 1 year being redshirt, it doesn't affect your eligibility, but you can still train and still be part of the whole team process. And if you're in a good setup under a good coach in the collegiate market, you should use that. You should use that as a way to continue to build yourself as a player. So I think it's interesting that you actually embrace that, whereas there's a lot of kids this day and age that I hear of, especially when I talk to your coaches on a day-to-day basis, where they say, hey, we had this kid redshirt, but he wants to leave. He wants to go to the next program and the next program and the next program. It's almost like when you're in that kind of thought process, you're not really growing. You're not adapting. You're not in a situation saying, hey, you know what, I'm in a little bit of a situation here where I'm not going to play. That's already a mental kind of block. and it can kind of shake you up a little bit. But that's where, you know, those who succeed and those who fail in any facet of life, you know, are distinguished because, you know, you're in a situation where you're not potentially going to play for a whole year and all you're going to do is train and study, right? You know, a lot of people would just tap out. You know, it's too hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in that situation, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And what they don't realise, the next step might be the same thing, or worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So it's interesting that you push through that. I think that's really interesting. The other thing too is, and why I was laughing my head off with what your goalkeeper coach said, it was no different when I was at Sydney United. I was a young guy, 15, when I went up to the reserves. It was like a star-studded cast of whether it be, you know, the Colts under 18s, 17s, 18s, all the way through to reserves and first grade, just a who's who of, you know, guys who went on to play in, you know, international markets and play for Australia or otherwise. And our coach at that time, the goalkeeper coach, he trained myself, he trained Spider, Jolka, Kalats, Johnny Perosh, Tommy Milicic and myself. And we'd all train together, but I always remember it was Steve Watson. So he was a kind of a bit of a legendary goalkeeper back in the old NSL. And what I used to say, I don't care how you save the ball, as long as you keep it out of the net. It's an old school mentality, and I love that you said that because it took me back a bit as well. I love that you actually said that. But we move onwards. So obviously that first year you were kind of you went through that redshirt process, and then you broke out and started playing regularly at Aldston Broders. The interesting thing is, and this happens, right? A lot of kids that want to jump on board this process, I tell them there's a lot of ups and downs in this process. And what I mean by that is you could get recruited by a particular coach and then the next year they're gone, right? And it's no different than any professional environment in the world. You might have a coach who's signed you for a club, and then the next season someone else comes in, they have different plans or otherwise. So how obviously you experienced that, because I think did Scott come in later on in the piece, kind of in your final years, or when did that transition happen?
He came in my second year. He came in my second year.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So Scott came on board. Scott's a great friend of mine as well, and you know we had one of our boys from Perth, like Aiden Dragon, spent time at AB, and so from your perspective, how is that shift, and how did it change the team dynamic, and did it affect a lot of the guys? Because sometimes when that happens, some guys would turn around and say, "Hey, I'm leaving this setup. I'm going to go find another team to play for." How did Fippers Scott? How did he change kind of the culture, if at all? And did you see a kind of a big difference in the way that AB evolved as a program under Scott?
Yeah, so I mean it's a long story. But I guess we got some time here. But no, it was a very pivotal moment in my, I guess, college career, in its, I guess, trajectory, having Phipps come in. I'll be very open and honest about things. And when I first came into AB, I had like a very nice deal, had a very good deal, and by the end of my first year, just based on, I guess, the coach at the time were very happy with, how I was and how I train and everything like that. So I ended up getting an even better deal. But obviously when Phipps comes in, this happens a lot, obviously with many different coaches, things change. And suddenly maybe AB wasn't as affordable as it was before. So for me, it was definitely more of a struggle for me, in terms of, how I felt my mum was being impacted, my family was being impacted. That first year I was actually able to pay for it myself, just like through work and everything, just before I came in. But obviously now I needed to have the help from my parents, and for me that was it. It affected me a lot because for me I didn't want to burden my parents with that. So what certain things happen in that kind of avenue, but I never, I guess, I never really held it against Scott. I did at the time for a little bit, but after a while, and especially now as a coach, you kind of understand why coaches do those sorts of things. Obviously, wasn't super appreciative at the time, but he was always great to me. He always actually, when he came in and he told me that what was going to happen for the future years, he actually helped me a lot to get a transfer out and to other schools with really nice financial deals as well. I actually nearly ended up signing for another school, but I guess just through my parents or whatever it was, they were like, I think you've committed here, you should try and stay here. You know what I mean? And I wanted to stay either way, and I ended up sticking around. Obviously, it was a little bit tough because obviously they had, I don't know how to say it, but there was, obviously we had our squad our freshman year going into our sophomore and junior year. And, obviously Phipps coming in, he changed a lot of that. He brought in lots of different players, very talented players. Phipps does a great job recruiting and all that kind of stuff. So the general environment of the team, it changed. We probably had a lot more talented players. I think my first year we when I was redshirted, we won like 4 games or something, 4 or 5 games.
Wow.
Yeah, so he brought in lots of players, lots of different players, but I think the core group of just actually my class, the guys that I roomed with, my suite mates and everything, I think looking back now, we brought in the old school culture that I think was kind of needed to have that discipline for the future years. And I think in terms of the culture, not much changed, but we had more talented players, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I mean, my sophomore and going into my sophomore year, we obviously won more games. Junior year, we obviously won more games, and during that time, like I was saying before, he brought in his own players and really top talented players. And actually, at the time, he brought in a goalkeeper. My sophomore year. Super goalkeeper from Spain, top goalkeeper. He was actually like region player of the region and stuff like this. So really good player that I was able to learn a lot from. But obviously it was a little bit tough for me, just not playing 1 year and then the next 2 years. It was kind of tough. Because I only played a handful of games between those 2 years. But my last year was things just kind of came together. I ended up, starting the games, and I'm not going to say it too much, but we won the conference that year. So that's
what amazing. I think I still remember that moment, and I know going back and forth, and without even knowing you at the time, right? I'd go back and forth with Fippers because he was recruiting, and I tried to help him with some Aussie kids and otherwise, and. I'm not sure. Was Aiden part of your squad as a freshman when you were a senior, or no? He came in after.
Yeah, it was the year after. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember. I have a big soft spot for guys like Scott. I know that we talk at a very personal level about life, and I know that for him, it hadn't always been easy. And like, if he goes back in time with our discussion, you mentioned, hey. If you really understand, like, I didn't understand it. You from your words, you didn't understand it until you actually transitioned over as a coach. So knowing what Fippers had to actually go through, and I won't go into detail, but it was pretty hard, man. Like for him to get to a point where you guys could actually win a conference, testament to him as a coach and as a recruiter. And what he could do in a albeit it is a small school, it is pretty remote without doubt, AB, but he did an amazing job, and it's just great to hear from you that you embraced the fact that you were there to learn as well, right? So you were learning off really talented kids coming out of some of the best academy environments in the world, from wherever Scott may have pulled them through into the squad. So for you to be able to be a competitive goalkeeper and then be able to work alongside, another talented goalkeeper from an international market, as you did, phenomenal. So won a conference tournament, big part of that, fantastic. You started getting all your games and you graduated, obviously, which is fantastic. So what was the journey now into the coaching ranks? Because there's some interesting things that you mentioned, predominantly around, in terms of your background. You played an elite level, but you also experienced in the US, and I tell our kids here locally, if you get the chance in your summer months to be part of any of the semi-professional franchises and setups, that you should embrace that, because it's a really excellent way to continue to evolve as a player, because typically the levels of play in the NPSL on the men's side or the USL2 today, and on the women's side, the WPSL, they're all great environments to continue to evolve. As a player, and obviously for yourself, you ended up coaching at one of the NPSL franchises. What was that experience like, and what do you feel that kind of environment is of benefit for any kind of student athlete who's currently over in the US?
No, I mean, the NPSL, which I was involved with for 2 seasons. 1 year I was nearly about to play for that year, but one of the players that I was I guess coaching at the time, he ended up transferring to that team, and obviously there's NCAA rules. That obviously you can't be on the same team as players that you coach. Yeah. The second season, I was able to coach the team with another head coach, and that for me, that experience was amazing. There's some of those players are the top players in the college levels, and not just I guess in their conferences, but players that on the national level are recognized for how good they are, from Division 1 levels down to the NAIA level, you know what I mean? So there were top players, and from that, you've got top coaches. And for me, it was just another experience where I just wanted to learn and eat up as much as I can. And the year that I was actually able to coach for the season, he's one of the one of the best coaches I've worked under. I don't know how to say his name. I just call him G, but he's a coach from Brazil. He's coached professionally in Brazil and in Italy and in England. And he actually just came over to the US just that summer. And, he'd done an amazing job, and working with him, opened my eyes so much to the different levels of football. For me, obviously coming over to America was great, and learning from different coaches, like obviously Phipps, my first coach was Irish, and obviously, we'll talk about, I'm sure, about Drury and, like Ben Taylor and Ender, both, UEFA qualified coaches, top coaches, but, working under a coach like G, the Brazilian coach, was absolutely amazing. Just the level of experience that he brought to the field, and the way that he taught me. And actually, we call each other every now and then, every couple of weeks, to just chat about different things, which for me is, it's like, for me, it's just like opening up a gospel when I talk to him, you know what I mean? So no, it was amazing. Just, being in that semi-professional environment, like the NPSL, was great for my development, not just as a player, but as a coach. During my years as a player, I really wish that I stayed in America to do it. I just had to go home and work and everything like that. But no, I wish that I'd done it as a player. I think I would have grown so much from that. But no, like, I can't recommend highly enough staying over for the summer and continuing to play at a very good level, and not just at a good level, but obviously it's full time as well. You're training every day, you're playing. It's almost like college, but without the studying. And I think that's every young kid loves that. You know what I mean? So
That's the
no,
appeal.
I
Yeah.
can't. Yeah. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough of my experience at the NPSL level. It was massive for me.
That's awesome. And that was with the demise, was it? Which,
Yep.
yeah, okay. Yeah, we had one of our boys, Danny McBride, who was with Midland University in the NAIA, a nationally ranked NAIA program, and he played for the demise for one season as well. So I think when they won some kind of trophy, some cup, I can't remember what it was, but
Yeah.
it's awesome that, yeah, and I always tell our kids that there's always that opportunity to be able to play at that level without doubt during their summer months. So let's transition to Ferrum. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Ferrum. We've got about 13 minutes with yourself, Coach, but before Instagram shuts us down. But you want to go through Ferrum College, obviously your experience transitioning over as a coach into Ferrum. You want to talk a little bit about the Division 3 environment, where you guys play, your conference, and obviously, the kinds of kids that you recruit for at Division 3, within the Division 3 kind of system. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I had a really nice journey coming into Ferrum. I think it was actually a lot like my playing journey. I was able to be under different coaches and lots of different quality coaches, from the NPSL to Ben at Drury, and obviously being under Ender for a season. So coming into Ferrum, when we, for me, the mentality stays the same. We still want the top players. We still want the best players that we possibly can. Obviously at Division 3 level, there's more of a, I don't know if focus is the right word, but there's more of an emphasis on the academic side, just the way Division 3 is set up. But, for me, as when I was recruiting as an assistant coach, and my mentality as the head coach has always been the same. There's two things that I always look for. I guess maybe two with a minor point under one of them. But for me, it's always been, whatever you do, you give everything to. You have the highest work ethic, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's on the field. That's an expectation that we have of every player. And number two is that you're always good people and honest people. You know what I mean? So those two things for me were during the recruiting process, whether it was at Division 2 Drury or at Ferrum, those two things have always been at the forefront of my mind. You know what I mean? So, we've spoken quite a lot, I guess, of my journey and what everything's been going through. But, for me, those are the two biggest things that I've learned, throughout my journey, from in football, from coaching to playing, whatever it is. And being at that Division 3 level, I'm sure many coaches have said this, but, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, NAIA, you can't really look at those as different as, I guess, a ladder, if that makes sense. There's good programs Division 1, good programs Division 2, good programs Division 3, and obviously NAIA, and there are lots of top JUCOs as well. Yep. So, just kind of how we do things at Ferrum in terms of our recruiting and our conference and everything like that. It's a very, very tough conference. We compete in the ODAC, and that for me is, seen lots of different conferences during my years here, and it's definitely one of the top conferences that I've seen. Just from top to bottom, it's very competitive. It's very physical. So, there's lots of American boys who can run all day in the conference. I'm sure just like in every other team, the American boys are very fit. So, we compete in a very tough conference, and I think the reason why it's so tough as well is because there's no Division 2 schools in Virginia. So a lot of the times, for the Virginia kids, they obviously they want to go play Division 1, and maybe they don't quite make the cut. So then they obviously have to go play for Division 3 school if they want to stay in the state. And then obviously there's lots of Division 1 players who maybe don't enjoy their experience or whatever, so then they drop down to our conference. You know what I mean? So some of the players that I've seen in our conference, it's just you you shouldn't be playing in this conference. You know what I mean? So there have been some really, really top players in the conference, and with how we played last year, we had to grind out a lot of our results, and for last year we had a decent season. We had, I think, about 9 freshmen starting a game, so it was a rebuilding year for us. We end up going 10-7 and just missing out on the postseason. I think just on goal difference. So I think that I think we're nearly at that level in terms of competing for a championship. But obviously there are lots of different things that we need to do to make sure that we confirm that spot next year and not just scrape by. But otherwise I don't. Being in Division 2 for most of my time in America and just coming to Division 3, there hasn't been a big difference. The only difference that I've seen at Division 3 level is the facilities are much nicer. Just from my personal experience, I think I saw a comment before, someone saying Ferrum top facilities, and trust me, they absolutely are. And obviously there's a little bit more of a focus on the academic side. But for me, it's the student experience, the college athlete experience is no different to Division 2 or NAI or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So that's kind of fair.
Well, it's interesting that you see in pockets, right? It's like, bless you, like for example, in Virginia, you mentioned there's only Division 1, there's Division 3, there's no Division 2, right? So a local player would have to go out of state if they wanted to go play Division 2, right? It's good that you mentioned this, and so important in terms of the fact that you've got, it's very tough from top to toe within the conference, and you've got a lot of kids with the potential of being, in Division 1 or other kind of divisions at a very high level. They end up playing within the ODAC because that's the opportunity that they have, right? And that you mentioned that between Division 1, 2, 3, it really isn't a ladder system. It really is about, you've got great programs right across every single market. But it's a very interesting nuance in Virginia alone that you mentioned, with the fact that, there's no real Division 2 team. So it's either Division 1, Division 3, and so it's interesting that you kind of covered that off. Facilities or otherwise, absolutely, you spot on. I spent time at D2 programs, D1, and D3, and without doubt the D3 programs that I had spent time at, phenomenal facilities, absolutely. So it's good that you mentioned that, especially about Ferrum or otherwise. But you know what, Coach, we've run the gauntlet for the last 55 minutes or so, mate. Look, I'm extremely grateful. I'm extremely grateful that we connected. I remember, just only a short while ago in January, we came down to Sydney, and we we spent time together. We spent time training some of the goalkeepers with my other business, Tiger Goalkeeper, and just seeing you in action, the way that you interacted with the players that were down there, the way that you set up and structured training sessions, it was really top class. It really was. Just to give you a little bit of, a heads up. We had John Friedel that we had a chat with the other day. John actually sent me a private note last night, and he said, Coach Vu is one of the top young upcoming coaches in the NCAA. So I'm really grateful to hear that, because I'm just seeing the way that I interacted with you without knowing you when we first met over here in Sydney, and the way that I've seen you kind of grow and evolve, and your trajectory. I'm really excited for your future, mate, and I'm really I'm grateful to have been able to meet you and start a relationship in terms of being able to present back players as we do on a regular basis. But mate, enjoy yourself over there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'm just really grateful that you did spend time jumping on board with us today, mate.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate having a chat with you, and no, just kind of chatting about things takes me back a lot as well. So no, I really appreciate you doing this for me.
Yeah, no problem at all. So, one and all, check this live and exclusive interview with Coach Felix Vu of Ferrum College, NCAA Division 3. I'm going to finish up the live chat here, but it will be on our Instagram feed, so you can scroll right back through it again and listen to all the different key kind of bits and pieces of dialogue that myself and Coach Vu had together today on this live chat. But really, really grateful again, Coach. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you soon, mate.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
Bye.